Hey guys, Brian Cook with Humphries Archery. Welcome to Archery Made Simple. I'm the owner of Humphries Archery, and recently, after being in the stores for just a few days, it's come to my attention that there's a desperate need for some common ground in our archery world. So I'm going to do this little YouTube channel. This is going to be episode number 1, but just because then through the other episodes I can always refer people back to other episodes that I may cover some things. But a little background on me. I started bow hunting when I was 13, and it really was given to me by a friend. I've always loved the bow, but I was always fascinated with the archer, just the arrow and the bow, and how awesome it was that a guy could sit there and shoot an arrow downrange and hit a plate or whatever. So when I was a young boy, my best friend had a bow, and our playtime was always interrupted during the summer so that he could practice. His dad would always make him practice, and so we always had to spend about 30 minutes a day while he shot his bow. And for the first year or so, I used to watch him shoot his bow because I didn't have one. I just had one of those little green fiberglass ones with the little fiberglass arrows that had a little push-on tip on the front. But you know, watching him shoot his bow and watching his dad and his brothers shoot their bow, it was just fascinating to me. And I grew up in a family that were all rifle hunters, and so I was the black sheep when I took up a bow. But anyway, you know, as time went on, my love for archery just blossomed. And as I started going into pro shops, you know, the first time I went into a pro shop, I remember it was just like this aha moment of envy. You know, I looked at these bows, and, you know, I grew up bow hunting in the 80s, and so, you know, through the 90s was like there was kind of some shifts that were coming through the pipe with technology in the 90s that really kind of, in my opinion, revolutionized our industry. And I started Humphries Archery in 2001. It was our official year in business, but we started in the fall of 2000. So the world was kind of in a crazy place anyway. Everybody thought the world was coming to an end, and archery, in my opinion, was just getting ready to blossom. And as a matter of fact, the carbon arrow had arrived. No bow shops were selling it, at least here in Utah. Marvin Carlston had created and built the gold tip arrow and the Gladiator broadhead. So these two combinations, in my opinion, were deadly. And I was super eager to get rid of my aluminum arrows. I was way excited. Mind you, this is in the 90s. I was way excited to see where the next level of archery would go. And I remember going into bow shops, my local shops that were around here, and it was super disheartening when you went into a pro shop and the people behind the counter didn't share the same level of enthusiasm that you did, or at least as I did as an archer. And so I started shopping, and we had, you know, at the time there was, I think, 3 in the state, and one was fairly close, and then the other 2 required about a 30 to 45 minute drive to get there. But I remember going to the one up north in Salt Lake City, Utah, and meeting 2 gentlemen that really, if I can say, boosted my enthusiasm for archery. It was Mitch McKay, who still is in the industry today, and Mari Butterfield, who has passed away in the last, you know, few years. So, but those 2 people, because of their love behind the counter of an archery shop, set my sights on archery. They just ignited after being around those 2. And so I could go into the archery shop and literally sit there for hours and just listen to those 2 bicker behind the counter, because they were great friends, but oh, did they have a vast difference of opinion between the 2 of them in some of the things that they, you know, whether it was the bow they shot, whether it was the arrow or the broadhead or whatever. But they were so fun to listen to that when it came time for me to buy and purchase my very first bow, where it wasn't a hand-me-down or a purchase from a friend, I remember going in to buy my very first bow, and Mitch was the one that helped me. And for me, that experience was just awesome. I mean, it was so fun. And so fast forward 20 years, and I opened my first archery shop in, I shouldn't say fast forward 20 years, fast forward about 10 years. And then I opened my first archery shop. And I did because I felt like the shops that were local had lost that passion. They'd lost that investment, that reach for technology, because the carbon arrow had come available and nobody wanted to sell it. Matter of fact, I was working for my father, who was a welding supply company. So my background growing up prior to coming into this was construction, and then, you know, in my father's business, it was archery supply. So I did a lot with welding and understanding the procedures and repairs on welders, and we supplied all that kind of stuff. So, but guess what else I sold? I sold carbon arrows. Why? Because nobody wanted to. Because the technology was so different, and it was uncharted ground that people felt like, you know, the carbon in an animal could toxify the animal's meat and you could be eating carbon. It was going to blow up, and which we know that happens, but anyway, there was just so many unknowns, and everybody kind of stayed away from it for a few years when that arrow came out. But the technology was just scratching the surface of what its potential was. And I was a quick one to switch over from aluminum arrows to carbon arrows. I hated an arrow that got bent all the time. I hated going through them and trying to figure out which ones are straight, which ones weren't. I loved the concept. I was an easy hook, line, and sinker for the, hey, look, you can bend an arrow and it's still straight. So I remember switching over, and mind you, this is still back in the days of cable strings and you know, or cables on steel cables on a bow and strings. I mean, the technology had changed, and we were getting into those strings, but those bows were out of my reach. I was still shooting some of the older bows that had steel cables, and so there was a variance of you couldn't shoot this carbon arrow because it was too light, and so there was some crossovers through this technology that it was an interesting time, let's just say, in that world. And so when I came into the archery world, we were still dealing with a lot of the older, you know, steel bus cables and fast flight strings and single cam technology that Matthews had launched, and still dual cam technology. And you know, there was 4 or 5 bow manufacturers, not the plethora of bow manufacturers we have today. So that being said, you know, I came into the era when Matthews was just kind of taking off, and I came in when old technology was still coming across the counter, and you still needed to understand tiller tuning. You still needed to be able to create specific setups for specific bows, and overdraws were still, you know, we still shot a deflexed riser instead of a reflexed riser, and so I came in when I feel like the market was just like, you know, just ready to explode. And in the next few years it did. But I remember, you know, when I wanted to learn how to tune a bow, there wasn't information to do that. You couldn't go on YouTube and just, you know, find your bow, Google your bow, and then find somebody tuning it and kind of have a roadmap of where to start and where to end. I mean, I built my own bow presses to begin with. I built my own arrow saws to begin with, because that technology just, they weren't out there. I mean, Apple presses were around, but they were hard to get. They were super expensive, but they were super simple if you knew how to weld. And given my background, I obviously knew how to do that. So I built all my own stuff. So before this YouTube experience that we're going to share together gets taken that I don't believe in do-it-yourselfers, I'm a do-it-yourselfer, okay? I'm 100% the guy that was willing to do it and learn and take his own bow apart and put it back together and do all that. And today there's still room for that guy. Look, as a bow shop owner, there's a certain time of year, because everybody's a procrastinator, that our shops flood with bows to be tuned. And over the years, that tuning price has had to go up and up and up. And even recently, due to the economy that we're in right now and the massive confusion that's going on, we've had to raise our prices again. And to accommodate, wages for the youth and fuel prices. And it's a crazy world. So the guy out there that wants to do it himself, I completely get that. And I respect it 100%. So before anybody takes this channel as this guy doesn't want to teach you or want you to know about, no, that is not true. I believe there's a place for a pro shop, and there will always be a place for a pro shop. But I also believe there's times in your personal life where you will have more time than money. And there's going to be times in your life where you have more money than time. And depending on where that is, some people are willing to put time in because they can't afford the expense to do it. And then there's times when we have the money and we just pay somebody else to do it. Now, that being said, you're still that one guy floating out there that goes, well, I got the money and I got the time. Great. I'm not trying to knock anybody off their high horse here. All I'm trying to say is that there will always be time for you to learn on your own, and there will always be a need for a pro shop. We're going to get into pro shops and the difference between what a pro shop is and what a pro shop isn't, and that's for another episode. But the focus of this channel and what I'm going to do going forward here is to keep archery simple. Archery has got away from us because of information. And I'm not going to say that it's necessarily manufacturers' bad information, although manufacturers do support some of the information that's going out that I would call bad information. But for the most part, most manufacturers are pretty even keel, and they're trying to stick to the common sense. Now, marketing, on the other hand, sometimes we're just relabeling a market to a market. And I'm very upfront with that when customers and consumers come in our stores. And that's one thing I pride myself with the boys that work for me. They're not going to oversell you on anything. A pro shop shouldn't be there to oversell you on anything. They should be able to give you a good, better, and best. And sometimes that best has a place, and sometimes that best is just marketing. Now, if you need the best because you want the best and you need it for your ego, buy the best. If you don't need the best, but you need the performance of the best, and it still is in the better, and the performance is good, save yourself some money. Put your money in other places. So what I want to talk to you guys about, and what I'm going to share going forward from here, is some of the things that over the last 30 years as a bow hunter I've experienced. I'm going to share that with you. Some of the things that I pay tribute to my knowledge and my success in the field is experience. And that experience is behind a bow shop counter for the last 20 years of my life. Now, am I in the bow shops every day today? No, I'm not. And this is something I want to touch on. Just because I own Humphries Archery and just because I have been in the industry for over 20 years doesn't mean that I 100% know how to tune every piece of equipment that comes out. And the reason why I say that is because these young kids that work for me and these people that work in these pro shops that are all across this country, those guys are seeing your bow or your future bow every single day of their lives. So if you think somebody like me, just because I'm in the industry and I own a pro shop, I'm not behind the counter tuning every bow every day anymore. That being said, the boys that are in the pro shops that are tuning the bows every single day, the men that are in those bow shops that own the pro shops that are still in their pro shops tuning those bows every single day, those are the people that know what it takes to tune your equipment. Yes, I may know what it takes to tune your equipment, but I might not have the experience that I need to tune every single type of equipment. So before you think there's not a need for a pro shop because you yourself have been in the industry for 5 years or 20 years, and you've tuned your 20 bows over the 20 years, doesn't mean you're an expert, okay? These kids and these women and young men and men, because a lot of pro shops are owned by an individual that he runs it. I have 3 of them. I can't be in all 3 stores at the same time. I try to share my face and share my experience, and I spend more time trying to advance my employees and keep them knowledgeable, but I also have a couple other businesses that I own as well. So, but what I want to do is I want to bring this whole information that I want to share with you over the next, I don't know how long this is going to last, because I feel like there's so much that we can share and really knock off a big chunk of it, that if you'll just stick to this, it's going to consistently be the same over the next who knows how many years. I mean, technology obviously can change, but in the last 5 to 7 years in our archery world, I'm going to tell you technology hasn't really changed. Now, do we have sights out there that are now auto-ranging? Sure. But has that changed the flight of an arrow? No. Has it changed, how an arrow performs coming out of a bow? No, it does not. It's just made it easier and, in my opinion, maybe handicapped the archer a little bit, because now he relies 100% on technology instead of instinct. Now, again, that's not a hater. That's just my personal preference. People hit me up all the time. Do you shoot X sight? No, I don't. Why? Because I just don't want that. That's not me. I don't need a lens on my bow. I don't need batteries operating something, and I don't need something to tell me what the yardage is. I would like to use that skill level myself. Now, do I have a rangefinder? Absolutely. Does it require me to pick it up and use it? Yes, it does. Does that mean I'm hating on the people that are using auto-ranging sights? Absolutely not. I sell them. I enjoy the customer that purchases those because we make money on them. Now, that being said, you're going to get a 50-50 from me when you come in to get it. And you come in and say, hey, I want one of these sights. I'm going to say, okay, great, here it is. And your next question back to me is going to be, do you shoot this? And I'm going to say, no, I do not. Does that mean I hate X brand of sight? No, it's not. It just means that's not my place and where I want to be as an archer. Look, we're all entitled to our own opinions. Y'all can do what you want to do. I'm just here for the brand new archer that's super frustrated with trying to figure out this guy and what they're saying, and how you get into archery and how you get the most benefit for what you're paying for what your setup is, and how to set up your bow properly without going to these extreme rights and extreme lefts. Now, you're going to have people out there that are going to tell you that don't listen to this guy. It's your opinion. And I'm completely fine with that. I know that everybody comes through the front door of the pro shop. When I was running, I ran all 3 stores at one point. So whichever store, A, B, and C, there were some customers that came in, didn't like me. That's okay. I have 2 other shops that hopefully you like one of those guys. But that being said, the information that came from me to my employees becomes the most beneficial factor. The experience coming down the pipe from generations past before us is what we can adapt and move forward with. Technology today is amazing, but technology is also super confusing for some people. And some people don't want to go to computer-generated sites. They don't want to go to multi-level pins and movable sights. Some people want to stay extremely... Look, your style of hunting should be adapted to you. That's what I'm going to talk about today. Not necessarily today, but in the future. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the different styles of hunting. I've been to Africa. I've been to Texas. I haven't been to New Zealand. I haven't been to some of these exotic places, but I've hunted a lot of vast and different animals over the years with a bow. That's my passion. I have zero desire to shoot a rifle. Zero. Do I have rifles? Sure. Do I understand them? To an extent, enough to get myself in trouble. But would I ever come on here and tell you to do something with a rifle? Absolutely not. That is not my specialty. So what I want to talk about going forward from here on out is how do we keep this super simple? How do we share the information that's going to give you a common ground that you can get the very, very most for your bow setup and not maybe necessarily have to spend money where money doesn't need to be spent? And how do I get the most out of what I've already got? So I encourage you to stay tuned. We're gonna talk about things, and in the comments, please feel free to leave comments. The wonderful thing about YouTube is if I don't like your comment, I can delete it. But that's not my point. If you have comments or things that you would like to see or you'd like to talk about, now I already know what I kind of know some ideas of the direction that I want to go with this channel, because we're going to talk about arrows, we're going to talk about broadheads, we're going to talk about bow setups, we're going to talk about peeps, we're going to talk about D-loops, we're going to talk about rests, we're going to talk about stabilizers. We're going to cover everything. Now, I'm going to avoid a lot of the rabbit holes because I feel like that's where people get lost. But I am going to expose rabbit holes so that you understand why you don't need to go down the rabbit hole. If I don't show you the rabbit hole, then you're going to think that I don't know where the rabbit hole's there. I know the rabbit hole's there. But there's a lot of information out there that you can get lost in a rabbit hole and just get super confused if you can't pull yourself back out and go, okay, where's the common denominator here between extreme left and extreme right? We need to be right here. So come along on the journey with us. We're going to share, and I'm going to end up in my pro shop, so I'm going to have some of these boys sharing some of these tips with you. I have some really good friends that are super, super knowledgeable about some of this stuff that are maybe other pro shop owners that I know that are great, great guys and do an amazing job on setups. So, but I would like you to get their opinion as well, because I feel like, you know, out of the voice of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established, right? We need to come back to a common ground. Our industry is amazing. It's awesome. We have great manufacturers. Marketing is amazing as well. We just got to be careful of how we're marketing and what we're marketing and who's leading who down what hole. So if you want to go to the extremes, there's lots of channels out there to follow to go to the extremes. If you want to keep it simple and you want to just keep your you know, what should I spend my money on and what shouldn't I spend my money on, stay here with us. We're going to teach you the differences. Thanks for watching. If you like it, subscribe, share it with your friends. We'll be back.